Yes, two chairmen we're talking about this morning. Firstly, the BBC chairman appointed under Boris Johnson, a former Goldman Sachs banker, former boss of Rishi Sunak, no less, who has been now discovered to have lent Boris Johnson money whilst Boris Johnson was living in number 10. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that necessarily there was anything untoward going on, but it does raise some questions about why this individual was appointed to chair the BBC board, and clearly there are big questions being asked there. The Labour Party this morning calling for an investigation into what has gone on, although not calling for the resignation of the chairman of the BBC board at this stage. They want to uncover the facts. The person they are calling for the resignation of, however, is the chairman of the Conservative Party, Nadhim Zahawi, who was, of course, before he became a politician, elected first in 2010, he was a successful businessman. He founded the polling company YouGov and made a lot of money doing so.
It's worth about 100 million, isn't he? Something like that.
Well into that range. And there have been questions over specifics of tax affairs of his in the 2000s, money that was in an independent trust that was in a British overseas territory, and money that was then went to his father, and it's all very complicated. But it turns out that over the summer, between July and September last year, Nadhim Zahawi paid back taxes to HMRC with a 30% surcharge, as it is being reported, meaning that there was, at the very least, some carelessness there in terms of his tax affairs.
And the crucial part about that period of time, of course, is that he was Chancellor at the time, which would mean he would be the boss of HMRC whilst those negotiations were going on. So a lot of people will question whether that was fair, not least when normal folk at home are filling in their tax forms thinking, well, could I be careless to the tune of multi-millions of pounds and still be in high office, to be chairman of the Conservative Party?
It certainly doesn't look good, and it is also difficult because this happened and it wasn't a transparent process at the time. The government says that, of course, tax affairs are private for private individuals. However, there seems to be a very clear case of public interest in this case, and the fact that we're only learning about it in drips and drabs through leaks and reporting now does raise some questions. However, it is important to say that HMRC now does say that the affairs are settled, that this does appear to be more carelessness than malice. And of course, if you have...
Yeah, but so what category do you put the Prime Minister's role in appointing Zahawi? Carelessness?
Well, I suppose it depends on what the Prime Minister knew about the affairs. Of course, when the Prime Minister appointed Zahawi to become chairman of the Conservative Party, this was a resolved matter. It was resolved in September, which, of course, was 2 Prime Ministers ago. Well, now, that might not seem like the longest amount of time in last year of all years, but it does mean that perhaps when that due diligence was done on those appointments, nothing would have come up as, of course, it was a settled matter by September.
A careless Chancellor, though. Bit of a worry about judgment there.
Perhaps a worry about judgment, perhaps a worry about what Zahawi might be thinking. Perhaps he should have had a different accountant in the early 2000s. But clearly this is a headache for the government in a week that they didn't need yet another headache. We're, of course, looking at more strikes, at the highest tax burden of recorded history. It's a very difficult time.
Tom,